There is a retirement account millions of Americans have heard about, many have been told they should open, and far too many keep putting off. I was one of them. I knew what a Roth IRA was. I had heard people talk about it. I knew it had something to do with retirement and taxes. I knew it was supposed to be especially useful when you were young. But I always had a reason not to open one. I needed to make more money first. I needed to get my expenses under control. I needed a bigger emergency fund. I needed to understand investing better. I'd get to it next year. And then next year became the year after that. The strange thing is, I never felt like I was making a bad financial decision. I wasn't blowing my money on something reckless. I wasn't ignoring my bills. I wasn't taking some huge financial gamble. I was simply waiting. And eventually I realized that waiting had a cost. Not a fee. Not a penalty. Not a charge showing up on my bank statement. A cost measured in years. Because one of the biggest advantages of a Roth IRA isn't something you can deposit more of later. It's time. That's what this video is really about. Not just what a Roth IRA is, but why I ignored it for so long, why the decision felt completely reasonable at the time, and why starting earlier can matter even when you don't have much money to start with. Most people who have heard of a Roth IRA probably fall into one of three groups. The first group opened one at some point, put some money in it, and hasn't really thought about it since. The account exists. Something is happening in there. They're just not entirely sure what. The second group has been meaning to open one for years. They know it's supposed to be good. They just haven't quite understood the details well enough to feel comfortable taking the first step. The third group looked into it once, heard there was an income limit, decided they probably made too much, and moved on without actually checking the current rules. And all three groups have something in common. The problem usually isn't that they don't care about their financial future. It's that the cost of doing nothing is invisible. Nobody sends you a bill for the Roth IRA you never opened. There's no overdraft fee. No late notice. No notification saying, you just lost another year of potential compounding. The calendar simply moves. So let's make the account itself simple. A Roth IRA is an individual retirement account with a particular tax structure. You generally contribute money you've already paid income tax on. That money can then be invested inside the account. And if you eventually take qualified distributions under the applicable rules, the money can come out tax-free. That's the part that gets everyone's attention. But there's another distinction that beginners often miss. A Roth IRA isn't the investment. It's the account. Think of it as the container. Inside that container, you can hold investments. Those investments are what have the potential to grow. The Roth IRA determines how that money is treated for tax purposes. That distinction sounds small. It isn't. You can open a Roth IRA, put money into it, and still leave the money sitting in cash. The account exists. It's funded. But the money isn't necessarily invested the way you intended. I didn't understand that clearly at first. I thought finding the right account was the hard part. I didn't realize the bigger question was what I would actually do once the account existed. Now compare it with the other accounts you probably hear about. A traditional 401k or traditional IRA generally gives you tax benefits today and taxes distributions later under the applicable rules. A Roth IRA generally works in the opposite direction. You contribute after-tax money today, and qualified withdrawals can be tax-free later. That can be particularly valuable if your investments have decades to potentially grow. Imagine putting $10,000 into a long-term investment. If it eventually becomes $50,000, $100,000, or more, the important question isn't just what you originally contributed. It's what happened to the money while you weren't touching it. That's where time enters the story. A contribution made in your 20s can potentially have 30 or 40 years ahead of it. A contribution made in your 40s has less time. A contribution made in your 50s has less again. That doesn't mean starting later isn't worthwhile. It means starting earlier gives compounding more time to work. And that was the part one didn't appreciate. I kept asking myself how much money I could afford to invest right now. I wasn't asking what today's money could potentially become if I gave it decades. Those are completely different questions. And once you understand that, lifestyle inflation starts looking different too. I kept telling myself I'd start investing when I earned a little more. That sounds reasonable. Until the raise comes. Then your apartment gets nicer. Your car gets newer. You eat out a little more. You upgrade a few things that used to feel like luxuries. Maybe you add another subscription. Maybe the vacations become a little more expensive. None of these decisions feels outrageous by itself. That's what makes lifestyle inflation so difficult to notice. It doesn't usually arrive as one terrible financial decision. It happens one normal decision at a time. Income goes up. Expenses find the income. And suddenly you're earning substantially more than you were 5 years ago, but somehow you still don't have much more available to invest. The future raise you were counting on didn't create room for investing. It created room for a bigger lifestyle. And the Roth IRA got pushed back again. That isn't necessarily a moral failure. It's just what happens when future goals are competing against spending decisions that are visible today. You can see the new car. You can enjoy the restaurant. You can feel the vacation. You can't see the retirement account that doesn't exist yet. That's why the next part is so familiar. The failed attempts. The first one usually starts with good intentions. You read an article. Someone mentions their Roth IRA. You watch a video. You decide you're finally going to figure this thing out. You open a browser and start comparing brokerages. Then you see 5 different opinions. One person recommends one company. Someone else recommends another. Then you start researching index funds. Then ETFs. Then target date funds. Then you find an argument about whether you should invest now or wait for a market correction. 20 minutes later, you are not closer to opening the account. You're just more confused. So you close the browser tab. I'll come back to this when I understand it better. You probably don't. 3 weeks later, you've forgotten about it. That is one of the most dangerous forms of financial procrastination because it feels productive. You researched. You learned something. You intended to act. But nothing actually changed. The second attempt usually comes when you suddenly have extra money. Maybe it's a tax refund. Maybe it's a bonus. Maybe you get an unexpected check. For a few hours, it feels like the perfect opportunity. You think, this time I'll put some of it into a Roth IRA. Then you look at the amount. It isn't thousands of dollars. Maybe it's a few hundred. And suddenly you convince yourself it's not enough to bother setting up the account. So the money goes into savings. Or toward a vacation. Or toward something else that feels more immediate. Again, nothing about that decision feels reckless. That's the problem. The third attempt is the income limit confusion. You hear there is an income limit for direct Roth IRA contributions. You do a rough calculation. You think you might be close. Maybe you think you're over. You don't check the current IRS rules. You simply assume the account isn't for you. That's a mistake. Contribution eligibility and limits can change, and the rules depend on factors including income and filing status. So don't rely on an old article or a social media post from 3 years ago. Check the current rules for the year you're contributing. And if your income is above the direct contribution limits, don't automatically conclude that the Roth strategy is unavailable. There are other strategies, including the backdoor Roth, but they involve additional tax considerations and should be understood properly before you act. The important point is simple. Don't disqualify yourself without actually checking. All 3 failed attempts have the same structure. They begin with a reasonable thought. Then something creates friction. Then you postpone the decision. Then the decision becomes another thing you were meaning to get to. It's basically a closed browser tab. Reasonable in the moment. Expensive over time. So what actually fixes it? The first step is surprisingly simple. Open the account. Not research it for another month. Open it. Choose a reputable brokerage that offers Roth IRAs and fits your needs. The setup is usually straightforward. And you don't need to begin with some enormous amount of money. That's the second step. Fund it with an amount that fits your situation. Maybe it's $100. Maybe it's $500. Maybe it's more. The goal isn't to prove that you're wealthy. The goal is to turn the account from an idea into something that actually exists. Because once it's open, the question changes. You're no longer asking, should I open a Roth IRA? You're asking, how much can I put into it? That's a much better question. Then comes the part that causes many beginners to freeze. What do I invest in? You don't need to find the next great stock. You don't need to become a professional trader. For some beginners, a diversified, low-cost investment or a target date fund aligned roughly with their expected retirement year can be a simple place to start researching. The point isn't that one investment is automatically right for everybody. The point is to choose an approach that fits your time horizon and risk tolerance and that you can actually stick with. Because a perfect investment strategy isn't very useful if you panic the first time the market falls. Then automate the process. Set up a recurring contribution from your checking account to your Roth IRA. Whatever amount fits your budget. Maybe it's $50 a month. Maybe it's $200. Maybe it's more. The amount can change later. What matters is that you stop making the decision from scratch every single month. The money moves before lifestyle can find it. That's what automation does. It doesn't make you more disciplined. It makes discipline less necessary. And when your income increases, don't automatically let your lifestyle absorb the entire increase. Give your future a raise too. Maybe part of the raise goes toward your Roth IRA. Maybe you need to build your emergency fund first. Maybe you need to pay down high-interest debt. The right answer depends on your situation. But the principle is worth remembering. When your income goes up, don't make sure only your present gets richer. Let your future benefit too. And that's where the Roth IRA starts to mean something beyond taxes. It's a way of putting part of your financial future on autopilot. A quiet account in the background. You contribute. You invest. You leave it alone. And time gets to do what time does. That's the part one wish I had understood. I thought investing was something you did after your financial life was already working. After the raise. After the debt. After the emergency fund. After the right moment finally arrived. But the system is part of how you make your financial life work. The Roth IRA wasn't something I needed after I became financially successful. It was one of the tools I could have used while I was becoming financially successful. That distinction would have changed the timeline. We tend to imagine wealth being created by one giant financial move. A huge investment. A business that takes off. A windfall. Something dramatic. Most of the time, it isn't built that way. It's built through decisions that look almost boring when you make them. A contribution. An investment. A system. Another contribution. Another year. And another year. Until eventually you look back and realize those small decisions weren't actually small. They just needed time. And that's what makes the regret complicated. If you're 25 watching this and thinking retirement is so far away that it barely matters, that's exactly why time can be so powerful. You don't need a huge amount. You need an early start and enough consistency to give it a chance. If you're 35 and thinking, I should have started 10 years ago, I understand that feeling. But don't turn regret into another reason to wait. You can't go back and invest at 25. You can only decide what happens from today forward. And if you're 45 or 50, the lesson isn't that you've missed your chance. The lesson is that waiting another 5 years won't bring back the previous 5. You still have time. Use the time you have. Understand the rules. Look at your financial situation. Make an informed decision. And start building something that belongs to your future. Because an account that's been open for 20 years can look very different from an account opened in a hurry at 52. Not necessarily because one person was smarter. Not because one person had some secret investment. Because one account had more time. That's the part one was giving away without realizing it. I thought I was protecting myself by waiting until I was ready. Eventually I realized I wasn't waiting for the right time. I was waiting to feel ready. And feeling ready isn't a financial strategy. The calendar is going to move either way. The only question is what you'll have done with the time. So if you've been thinking about opening a Roth IRA but keep telling yourself you'll do it when you earn more, when you understand investing better, or when life finally settles down, ask yourself one question. Are you actually waiting for a better financial opportunity? Or are you simply waiting to feel ready? Because sometimes the most expensive financial decision isn't the money you spend. It's the opportunity you keep postponing. If this video helped you understand the Roth IRA a little differently, subscribe to Money Matters with Kris Morgan. But before you leave, I want to hear from you. Have you already opened a Roth IRA, or are you still waiting to start? Tell me in the comments. And if you're already investing, share one thing you wish you had known when you started. And if there's a money topic you want me to break down in the next video, tell me that too. Because that's what we're doing here, taking the parts of personal finance that never got explained clearly the first time and breaking them down in plain English. And if you know someone who's been saying, "I'll start investing when I make more money," send them this video. Not as a criticism. Just as the conversation I wish someone had started with me years earlier. Because the money you spend can sometimes be earned again. The years you postpone cannot.